Welcome to Life and Service. I'm your host, Catalina Lee, and this is the podcast where we talk about the hospitality industry and everything that goes into it. Every week at 7, we'll be releasing new episodes with many guests to come. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Life and Service. I'm your host, Catalina Lee. Welcome to episode 2. Today, our episode is going to be about tipping culture. This is something that is really anticipated that I know, and I'm sure that a lot of our viewers/listeners really want to hear about this. So today we do have a guest again. You remember her from last time. Kimberly Sanchez will be joining us today. So really quickly, before we kind of get into the interview portion of this podcast, I want to talk about a really brief history about tipping. So for those of us who don't know, tipping originally was something that started in Europe, but it was then used in the US, more specifically after the Civil War, because employers wanted to avoid having to pay their freed slaves who were now working in their establishments. They wanted to keep them from having to pay a livable wage or the same kind of wage that they were paying their other employees. So that is when, that mainly started of the 213 plus tips. It became more widespread, especially in hospitality jobs specifically, to justify those low/no wages. This is still something that we use very widely today. It has not changed. Especially if you live in a place like me and Kimberly we live in Texas, so this is definitely something that is a standard here in the state. There are also other states that it's the same standard. Of course, there are all obviously different states where that wage is a little bit higher because the cost of living is higher. So we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. So when you have a job that is your 213 plus tips, what that means and what that looks like is your tips make up the entirety of what you're making. That is your complete income. Because when you're getting that 213 hourly, most of the time you are never seeing that. Almost all of the time you are never seeing that 213 in your bank account. Because that 213 is kind of nowadays more used to cover your tax that's normally taken out of a paycheck. Now, obviously, that kind of differs, especially it depends on the kind of restaurant that you're working at. If you're working at the kind of restaurant where you get tipped out every night, whether those tips go directly to a pay card or you get tipped out in cash, or if you work in a restaurant where, yes, you are making 213 plus tips, but you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks or a weekly paycheck, whatever that may look like. Obviously, in those kinds of instances, the tax thing kind of fluctuates. So big question of the podcast today, something I want you to think about for the entirety while you're listening to me and Kim talk today is, in your opinion, is tipping really optional or is it just expected? Personally, I don't think that it's something that is optional. For me, it is very much expected, especially because as servers, even if my server is doing a completely terrible job and they're literally being rude to me and damn near throwing my food in my face, only in that instance, and I'm you really have to push me to that point for me to be no tip. The reason I say that is because as somebody who has been serving for a long time, if I'm not making a tip off a certain table, or if it's a really slow night and I'm only getting a total of 4 or 5 tables that entire night, if I don't make a tip off of one of those tables, I may not make that much, and that's really doesn't feel good, to have to be yeah, I just worked a 8-hour shift and I'm going home with $30, I've had days like that. So for that reason, in my opinion, I don't think that it's optional. It's something that is very much expected for me. But obviously, as somebody who's been in the industry a long time, I know that I'm always going to have at least one table in my serving career, okay? And if you are starting to serve, you should know this as well. You will have many tables stiff you or not tip you or tip you really low or leave rude notes on your little receipt papers. So just a heads up. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and start getting into this interview. Without further ado, please welcome our guest, Kimberly Sanchez.
Alrighty. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me back. I'm really excited to be here and just expand some more on this really important topic that affects everybody in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to have you back to talk about this. I'm really, really excited for this podcast today. So let's just go ahead and get started.
Absolutely.
Our first point that we're going to kind of touch on is who tips and who doesn't. What I mean by that is, like, tipping behavior most of the time is going to depend on things like region, generation differences, whether or not they're ex-industry workers, and then you have, like, your international guests. So we're going to talk about all of those things. Statistically, by region, East Coast, large metro areas, those kinds of places are going to usually, people from those areas are usually going to tip more, meaning like 20% plus. That's like the average. When you're thinking more like Midwest to South, those people are going to usually tip between like 15 to 18%. And then you have West Coast, which usually tip only because on the West Coast they have a higher base pay. So this is what I was kind of touching on earlier about how you have different states that have a higher base pay because the cost of living there is more expensive, of course. So Kimberly, kind of touch on that for me. Like, is this like trend kind of something that you see often?
Absolutely. I feel like all these percentages are kind of a little bit more on the nose. The southern, as we live in the South, 15 to about 25 is usually where we land. And then we do have a mutual friend up in the West Coast that just kind of has a higher base pay. So that kind of covers it, but not really, because that base pay mostly goes to taxes nonetheless. So yeah, it does definitely differentiate by region, and you can definitely tell when you have certain guests that are visiting from certain areas how that tipping kind of goes up and down, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So another instance is like generational differences.
Yeah.
So statistically speaking, older generations usually tip better. Gen Z and younger millennials usually tip less, especially when using things like delivery apps or ordering takeout. Obviously, me and you, primarily, we are servers, but we have both been DoorDashers before. You know, you got to do what you got to do in this economy.
Yeah.
So we've definitely experienced the pretty low DoorDash tips.
Absolutely.
But let's kind of talk about generations and, you know, experiences that you've had as far as tips.
In regards to the generational differences, I would say I'm neither here nor there on reaffirming this. I feel like older generations, I feel they are just more on the quality of service. Gen Z understands the hard work. And millennials are kind of almost indifferent. I feel like millennials are kind of the worst tippers in my personal opinion.
I absolutely agree with you on that.
And I feel like both the older generations, like boomers and Gen X and Gen Z, I kind of base it more on service, on quality. I do think boomers and Gen X are a little bit more on the opinionated side of things. You know, they'll look at the menu and be like, oh, these prices. Sorry, sir, I'm just the server. I didn't make the menu, you know. And then Gen Z, you know, if you just take the time to really serve them properly, you know, get them their refills, get them the basics, you know, they appreciate the bare minimum, which is, as a Gen Z, like, I totally agree. I just want service, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely, I'm neither here nor there. I think it's all just a polarizing opinion.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I do think that some of my best tips that I've ever received have been from older generations.
Oh, yeah.
Just because sometimes, like, when you're connecting with a guest and you're getting to know each other, like, when I start to tell, like, older people about, like, oh, how I'm in school and, you know, things like that, and this is what I want to do career-wise, they're always, like, they look at me like I'm, like, some helpful young, you know, person really just coming into themselves in the world.
Yeah.
And it's like they're like, oh, this is so beautiful to watch. Here's $200. Like, you know what I mean?
I definitely see that, yeah.
Yeah. But I also have had, like, really good experiences with, like, Gen Z. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I hate young people. Like, they never tip well, whatever. Which is something, yes, obviously I've experienced, like, bad tips from Gen Z, my fellow Gen Zers. But I have also received some pretty great tips from them just because, you know, a lot of the times, like, I feel like it's very common as servers to not serve younger generations as well because they're under this impression that, like, they aren't going to tip you. So you're like, oh, why am I going to even try?
Right.
Personally, I'm always going to go, like, my best because I want to be that one person that they do tip for. Like,
also, I just feel like they're easier to talk to.
Yeah, they're
my age.
Exactly.
You know, they understand trends and like little references and jokes. So, you know, it's just easier to come around.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, like, you make a friend out of that.
Right.
And that's really, really cool. So, yeah, love that. Let's move into things like ex-industry workers while we're on the topic of young people. We do get our fellow industry workers / ex-industry workers that come in. What are they like as guests?
They can be the best and the worst customers or guests. By best, I mean they understand the hustle. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand like the physical portion of how hard serving is. Lifting up like 5 plates is like about 10 pounds. Like you're just like running, I mean, speed walking essentially the whole 6 hours, 8 hours that you're there in the restaurant.
Hey, sometimes I run on the shift because sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. You got to hop and skip and all that good stuff, right? So they understand that. But on that same token, they have a high standard. They can come with a high standard, especially to like the most bare minimum restaurants, right? Which is kind of difficult, right? So like I've had guests that, oh my God, yes, I've been a server before. Like I've been a bar back, I've been a bartender, like all this stuff. $10 and $200. You know, and it's just like, oh, did I do, like you're just stuck in your head like, did I do something wrong? Did I do something wrong? At the end of the day, you know, it's just, you can't sway them, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get what you're saying. I definitely feel like I have had, like, industry people that are, like, the kind of people that want to give you, like, critiques. They're like, hey, like, I used to be a server, like,
here's what you can do better.
I would have done, like, this, and this. And I'm like, whoa. Pause, girl. I don't know how long ago you were a server, but you ain't serving in this restaurant right here and now. So.
And sometimes it's outdated.
Yes.
And not efficient.
Especially, like, when I get, like, no offense to millennials, but when I get millennial ex-industry workers, they are always the ones to be like, oh, you know, I used to serve too. Or even worse, like, boomers who used to be servers.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, all right, your tips back then were, like, a couple nickels and a smile. Mine are like, I need you to give me that $20. Like,
right. I mean, and also it's just like the economical differances are not comparable. Like, you know, you can go to the movies for like a penny, you know, like,
yeah, they bought their houses for like $5,000. I'm like,
yeah, right, exactly.
Crazy.
And nowadays, like, one tip is like, let's say $10. That's enough to get me like halfway to work, you know, like,
yeah.
So it's just not comparable.
Absolutely. Moving on, talking about like international guests, how do we feel about that? So personally, us being in Texas, I'm sure me and Kim can both agree on this. We constantly get guests who are coming from like Mexico because obviously we're so close. Right. So tipping in Mexico is a little bit different.
Yeah. So I'm like, I was raised in Mexico, so I kind of have a little bit of reference for this. The minimum in Mexico is 15%. That can go lower, that can go higher, depending on the region. Depending on what kind of restaurant it is, but minimum is always going to be 15. Always has been. In the United States, the minimum is 20%.
Well, like 18.
18 to 20, yeah. And also just like the the translation of the peso to the American dollar is just like not comparable. 20 pesos is 1 American dollar, so that's just also like another way to throw it out there. So you do kind of see that here, you know, in San Antonio, where we have international guests that drop a pretty penny on their dinner, and then they slap on that 10-15% on the tip.
And sometimes it's not because they're like trying to be rude or anything,
Right.
but a lot of the times it's because they genuinely don't
It's
know.
just their custom.
Yeah. Have you ever like had to educate a guest?
Yeah, so one thing that I do get a lot with my international guests is they always ask if the tip is included, because that's another thing. In Mexico, they also include the gratuity, the 15% gratuity already on the check. And another thing about Mexico is you pay up front. You don't pay at the table.
Yeah.
So you do have to educate them on certain things like that. And it has been, they ask and bring it up to my attention, and I have to correct it and just let them know, yeah. So we usually tip, like, just throw it out there, and not because I'm begging, but just to, like, let them know, like, the common is, like, 18 to 20%. You have to write it there on the bill. 1 copy's for you, 2 copies are for me. You leave it on the table, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
You know, you just gotta let them know about how, like, the custom is here in the United States.
No, yeah, absolutely. I do think that, like, notoriously I've gotten better tips from internationals when I go out of my way to educate them on how it works here. Because a lot of the times it's really not because they're trying to be bad guests. Like, they just genuinely don't know.
Yeah.
And for that reason, like, that's why, you know, I'm always going to throw it in here when I bring the check. Like, hey, just so you know, like, tips not included, like you said. This is our standard kind of thing. So, yeah, really, really important. I mean, we've also had, like, different kinds of international guests. We've served several kinds of Europeans. We've served Japanese people.
French.
Like, exactly, yeah. So, it just kind of depends, but I do feel like as a server, especially if you're going to work in, like, a fine dining, like, setting, I think it is important to kind of know those standards of, like, the kind of cities that you might, like, or, like, the kind of countries that you might encounter in San Antonio.
I also just think it's the way, like, verbiage, the way you come across with things, you know. You don't want to ask, you don't want to say it like you're asking. It's more like, hey, statement-wise, you know, like, kind, friendly, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so moving into our next topic, let's talk about, like, the psychology and bias in tipping. In your opinion, do you feel like people tip more based on the service that they're receiving or more, like, out of habit?
I want to say service. I would like to say habit, but, like, on that same token, service, I feel, goes a long way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I especially agree, like, here's the thing, when you're a server, like, you know when you're a good server.
And you know when you're giving bad service.
Yeah.
Like, you're aware.
Yeah. But I also feel like it kind of, going back to the generation thing, I feel like it kind of depends.
I mean, yeah, it like, that's an intersectionality right there. Like, you have Gen Z where, like, of course they want to tip, but are you paying enough attention to me to deserve the 20, or should I give you the 18,
right,
or maybe the 15, you know, like.
Yeah, and then I have, like, older guests who, like, I literally will go, like, above and beyond for, and I'm still getting that, like, 10%.
Yeah.
Tip. And it's frustrating for sure, but it also, like, makes me feel a little bit better knowing that I did everything that I could to get a better tip. So, yeah, I feel like I honestly, like, I'm kind of nor here nor there. Statistically, more people tip, like, the 18 to 20% no matter what, unless the service is, like, extremely good or extremely bad.
Yeah.
But see, that, you know, statistically, that proves my point right there. Like, that's why I'm going to go above and beyond and give my best service, because I want to
you always want to give it your best shot.
Right, yeah. Anyways, okay, let's talk about something a little more, like, let's just dive right deep in there. So let's talk about, like, pretty privilege, how appearance race, gender can affect your tips.
Oh, it affects it in all the ways.
Yeah. Studies show that attractive white and female servers tend to get higher tips. Bias plays a big role, whether people admit it or not. This is something that is really, really important. I will say, I have, like, in every restaurant that I work with, I have friends who are also females. I worked with really beautiful girls. You know, I've worked with maybe less conventionally attractive girls and men. And sometimes we'll, like, be at the end of the night and we'll be talking about our tips. And I'm thinking, like, man, I got less tables than this other person and I made more money than them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang, like, am I low-key sexy? No, I'm kidding. No, yeah, but I definitely do think, like, it plays a big role. I mean, even just, like, the most obvious, like, women notoriously get tipped better than men. Because,
absolutely.
I mean, one, women just have a different way about them, like, tone-wise and the kind of energy that they're, like, bringing to a table.
Mm-hmm.
It's more softer, it's more feminine, it's you know, easier to swallow, if you will. But on top of that, like, especially if it's, like, a beautiful young girl, like, you're always going to enjoy talking to a beautiful young girl. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, especially if you're working in a place that's, like, you have a great bar area and you're getting a lot of men, you know, especially as bartenders. Beautiful women bartenders can make so much money. And it's, I mean, bartending is a skill. Like, I wish I was a good bartender.
Are you, though?
Exactly.
But I definitely do agree with you. I feel like all these things are correct. All these things are reaffirmed when you clock in at 4 o'clock every day, you know, like, it just comes with the job, you know, even down to the way you would dress, set your hair, do your makeup, it counts.
Yeah, absolutely.
It counts a lot. I just also feel like it also, in turn, I mean, it would suck, like, for me, if I were to go to a restaurant and I'm being served by somebody that doesn't even have their hair fixed up nicely, or, you know, like, just the basics. Like, at the end of the day, serving is a job, and you want to come presentable, right?
Yeah.
Like, you want to smell good, you want to look fresh, you want to look clean, you know, all that good stuff.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought up the hair thing, because I was gonna bring up, I don't know if, like, some of our viewers, some of our listeners might know what I'm talking about here, but on places like Instagram or TikTok, there have been, like, servers who will post, like, you know, different, you know, tips on, like, how to do your hair or what to wear your makeup a certain way so that you make more tips. So I really want to briefly talk about those things, because I do think that, one, it's a little strange, and we'll get into that. But as far as, like, how to do your makeup, you know, they always say, like, wearing red lipstick or wearing, like, you know, glitter on your inner corners.
I used to do that.
Same. Or, like, wearing your hair in pigtails or little braids, you know, like, those are things that are going to make you more tips. Also, wearing glasses.
Yep.
People who wear glasses say that they make more when they don't wear their glasses versus when they do. I think the biggest thing, one, I want to talk about the hair. The hair thing always made me feel super weird, especially because I did it a few times. At almost every restaurant I've worked at, I've done it at least once.
Just a little experiment.
Exactly, just to experiment, and I always make more tips, from men specifically. And it always feels so uncomfortable accepting that tip, because I'm never going to say no to money. Who am I, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that it's because they, like, find me more attractive like that. But it's weird because it's, like, this, like, infantilization.
Right. No, I agree.
And
that's happened to me a few times when I used to wear my hair like that.
Yeah, it's definitely something.
It's an interesting, what is it, personal statistic.
Yeah, or even just, like, the way you do your makeup. Like, it's something that's very, like, red lipstick is something that's very, like, hyper feminine.
Yeah.
And so, like, you are doing these things, and it feels, like, so strange, because you're, like, essentially, like, putting on this, like, mask at work, you know? And it's, like, really different, especially because, like, me, normally, like, I'm somebody who, like, I want to make more money for, like, who I am, and, like, my guests really getting to know me on a deeper level, rather than, you know, what I'm portraying to them.
Right.
All right, we don't want to dwell on this too much. Let's go into something more like charm. When serving your tables, do you feel like being charming or being like overly friendly is going to increase your tips? This one seems pretty obvious to me.
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel like the more welcoming you are to a table. Now, there is a point where too friendly is a thing.
Oh, absolutely. Like, especially when you're serving couples. Like, if you're being too friendly, sometimes the girl is like, oh, she's flirting with my man.
Rule of thumb, I always, whenever it's a couple, no matter the age, I always address the woman.
Exactly.
I'm always making eye contact with the woman. I'm being very nice with her. You know, not that I'm being rude to the man either. But everything I'm doing is addressing the woman. Just because, you know, as a woman myself, in a relationship, like, I just feel like there's that courteousness, you know? I don't want to come off like I'm flirting with their partner either.
Absolutely.
Not that I would ever. I'm at my job, you know, like I definitely draw the line between professional and private, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I definitely do think being friendly, you know, I'm not a big pet name person. I know some people are over exaggerative with the loves and honeys and stuff.
Baby.
And I can do it. You know, there's been times, but I don't do it to every table. I think it's just a dependent thing.
Like, notoriously, like, I'm one of those people that, like, I'll pull out a pet name every now and then. But it's because of my, like, it really lays on the Southern hospitality really
no. I mean, I'm not saying I don't do it. It's just more like...
Well, here's the thing. I only do it with certain people.
Right.
Like, if there's a kid at my table, I'm calling them sweetheart, honey. If I have an older man or an older woman... Well, if it's an older woman, they really don't like it. So I'll call them ma'am. But, like, if it's an older gentleman or a couple older gentlemen, like, getting dinner together or something, I'm always like, sweetheart, honey, because they love it. They eat it up.
I mean, it's also just the southern part in us, you know? It's just, like, across, again, an intersectionality.
I will say, when I'm serving couples, I do the same thing where I address the woman. For the most part, in the beginning... Until we start to talk about it, like, get to know each other, I'll, like, really, really try my best to slip it in there that I am gay and that I am engaged. Because then they're like, oh, like, she's not a threat. Yeah, no, you're totally good to talk to her and have an open conversation with us, babe.
And see, I want to emphasize this to the listener. You might not think it's a big deal and you think we're over-exaggerating. But these are literally, like, day-to-day things that, as servers, we take into consideration. And these things have happened before. Where, you know, we've gotten complaints from... Other servers have gotten complaints where the manager gets a call from a lady that, oh, my God, the server was being too nice to my husband. Or the opposite. Yeah. A male server's too nice to his wife, you know? And, you know, it's just the name of the game, and it comes with it, but... We want to prevent those things because at the end of the day, this is our livelihood. This is how we make our money. You know, $10 is $10 to us. You know, each table counts. Every second counts.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think those are pretty much like some of the more basic stuff that we do to kind of be friendly but not too friendly.
Yeah.
Also, really quickly, don't mean to go off topic. I think this is such a good podcast, especially for people who are just starting to get into the service industry.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like we're giving a lot of, like, tips.
Things that people don't really think about.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, as a new server, I didn't think about these things until I experienced them.
And, I mean, it just comes with, like, seasoning in the industry, right?
Yeah.
But, and even just as a guest, you know, I want guests to come and go and sit at a table in a restaurant and understand that it's not just taking orders and setting down plates and bringing refills. It's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
It definitely is.
All right. Let's talk about something we all hate. Biggest, like, dread that you will have as a server. The verbal tips.
Oh, my Lord. See, I appreciate a good compliment.
Of course.
I love, you know, especially like in business meals and stuff like that, where like the guys, you know, it's kind of like a trickle down system when I have a business meal. Mm-hmm. The way my service works counts to if they're going to close a deal or not. you know? And
Yeah.
like, you'd be surprised how many times service alone makes it work or not. You know, especially if it's like the person they're negotiating with, if their plate runs a little too late, or you're not mooching on them a little too much, or you're not refilling their drink without them asking, it all counts for something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also just feel like I know immediately when a table's not going to tip when they start to give me specific compliments.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, this was the best service we've ever had.
Right.
You made our night so memorable. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying that every time I get that compliment, they don't tip me very well. Because most of the time they do, especially working in a fine dining spot.
But it's an overcompensation.
But I can always tell there's a way specifically that they do it when they don't tip.
Right.
And it's almost like you can feel how bad they feel on the inside, and they're giving you these compliments to essentially make themselves feel better about not tipping you.
Right.
Alrighty, so let's go more into that and talk about petty or insulting tips. I'm talking like when your table leaves you a couple coins on the table, or when they write like a petty message on the receipt, or, you know, just things like that. Leave you religious pamphlets or whatever.
I definitely have gotten, so I don't know if guests know this, or like the listeners might know this, but there's certain Christian groups that have fake $100 bills or fake $20 bills.
Oh, with like Jesus' face on it?
Yeah, so like the one side looks like a $100 bill or like a $20 bill, and then you flip it over and it's like what are those called? A verse? Like a Bible verse. Mm-hmm. And then it has like Jesus' picture. One time a kid trolled me. Oh my God, this was the worst. A kid trolled me. It was like him and his girlfriend. It was like a $90 tab. He gives, instead of just leaving the bill on the table, he comes up to me and gives it to me. He's like, "Thank you so much." And I open the book and it's a $5 bill. And I'm like, okay, $5. I that's fine. I look at the $5 and it has Shrek on it. Ugh. That was like the most insulting. It kind of like becomes insulting and like,
no, yeah, it is
like
insulting.
You don't like disrespectful at that point.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly disrespectful, especially because like here's the thing about tipping. And this is why I personally also, again, do not think that it's something it's optional. I think it's expected. Because when you tip, you are paying for that service. If you don't want to tip, guess what? I'll put your food in, I'll bring it out to you in a bag to go, and you can get the hell out of here. But if you are sitting down, ordering from me, sitting at your table, going back and forth, communicating with me, expecting me to give you a service.
Right.
That is not free. Nowhere in the world is that free. So, that being said, like, tip your servers.
Right.
I have had some pretty insulting notes left on my tab before. I mean, there are things where it's like, sometimes people will do things and I don't even think that they're intending to be insulting, but it's like, what? Like, it just doesn't even make sense in my brain. Mm-hmm. Like, there was one time I was dining, like, I was, like, serving these 3 guys, right? And they were, like, all, like, my age at the time, like, definitely college kids, you know, like, chill guys, like, they all looked like they were wearing, like, work clothes, like, they had just left their 9 to 5 or something, I don't even know. But they were sitting at my table, you know, and I gave them great service, we're laughing, we're going back and forth, they're really cool, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. They leave, I go back to the table to pick up the check, and on the tip line, there is always something on the tip line. If it's not a dollar amount, it's something worse. On the tip line, they had left all 3 of their phone numbers. Like, no tip, no dollar sign, no cash left, no nothing. And I was like, oh my God, you're joking. They're so lucky that I didn't just put those freaking phone numbers, all 3 of them, into the system, and they would have been like in debt for the rest of their life trying to pay off that tip, okay? But I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But I was like, why in the world do you think, like, your server would want to, like, reach out and, like, text you and whatever, if you're not even gonna tip me.
Right.
Hello? Like,
I feel like that tells you everything about that person.
yeah, absolutely. It definitely does. I've also had, like, you know, like, seen different things about, like, when people get, like, notes left by, like, the churchgoers when they're like, oh, like, I give God 10%, why would I give you 18 or something like that, like, something ridiculous. So those always really suck.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, as far as, like, how the tipping system works. Do you think it's something that's more, like, broken or fair? Like, I know some people have arguments for/against, like, whether tipping should be abolished, you know, like, we should just no longer tip and everybody should have a wage. How do you feel about that?
I think if that's the issue, that would be a really high wage. I just think it has to be something really, really fair.
Yeah.
Because serving is an emotionally draining, physically draining, mentally draining, like, job.
Yeah, I mean, there's places, depending on the place that you're serving at, where if you're doing the math, you're making, like, $50 an hour.
Right. So unless a restaurant's going to offer me, like, 25 plus, you know, it'd be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just think from a business owner perspective, like, it's not smart, because if you start paying your servers, you're losing money, because that's money taking away from your company, taking away from your revenue and your income that you're making as a restaurant, that you're now having to pay your servers, which, it, you know, isn't great, because then you're losing money, but also, you know, sometimes you can't always afford to do that. Whereas, like, if you're leaving tipping culture a thing and you're allowing your guests to pay for that portion of your server's income, I mean, hey, that's, like, one less employee that you're really having to pay.
Right.
So I think it's important. I think it's a good system. Of course, you know, a lot of people who are against it, they would argue that, I mean, look at the way that it originated, something so ugly, you know? But I do think that as servers and as an industry, we have turned it into something that's really, really amazing, because you have people nowadays who are career servers.
Right.
They pay their bills. They have families. They have homes, like, and they live, you know, sustainably.
I also just think that people who are against it have never truly worked in a restaurant from, like, the front of house point of view, from a non-hourly wage position.
Yeah.
You know, you've never seen what it's like. You know, you have, like, as a server, you think we're only making, like, we're making $200 a night. No, we're not. You know, I'll tell you right now, maybe 50, 60 of those dollars are immediately going to tip outs. You know, your support staff, bussers, food runners, you know, all that stuff, hosts. So it's a breakdown, and it's, you get by, but it's not, like, you know,
Yeah.
enough.
Absolutely. And sorry. And I'm really glad that you brought up tipping out, because I think that's something that a lot of people and guests who aren't in the industry don't realize, is that tip out is a big chunk of your money, and it's normally based on not the tips that you're making or the percentage that you're making. It is almost always based on your sales. So you're tipping out like 4% of your sales to your food runners, your bartenders, your bussers, and sometimes, depending on the place that you work, even your hosts. And that's a lot of money at the end of the day, because think about it, your sales is not what you're making. So let's say I'm making $200 a night. If 200 is 20% of my like sales, that would mean that my total sales is like, what? I don't know. Anyways, I don't know math. I'm not going to be able to do this in my head. But that would mean that my sales is like a really large amount. So, that being said, my sales are probably like $2,000, actually. No. 1,000?
1,000, I think.
Okay, yeah. If I'm making 200, my sales are like 1,000. So if my tip out is 4% of 1,000, I don't know what that is. Kimberly, tell me what that is. You're better at math.
No, I am not.
1,000, 4%. $40. Okay, so that's $40. But most of the time when you're working at any kind of restaurant, your sales are a lot higher than that. And you're not getting that insured, 20% most of the time. So tip out is a very big thing. I also want to lead that into our next point of tip pooling. So if you've ever worked in a restaurant that has tip pool, what tip pooling is like basically you have servers on the floor. All of your servers are making their own tips. But at the end of the night, all of those tips are then put together and divided evenly. Yes, this can be great because you're having a sense of consistency, everything is fair. This promotes teamwork in a lot of places, but it also can create a lot of tension, especially if you have a few really high performers, and then they kind of feel like they are carrying for the rest of the team, which is really, really hard. Alrighty, moving in, kind of getting to the end here, let's talk about standard. I mean, we mentioned earlier that the minimum standard of tipping is 18%. This is something that me personally, I'll never go below that unless, like I said earlier, if it's really, really, really bad. If you're working in something like takeout, delivery, or a barista, that percentage is obviously going to be a little bit different. If you're doing takeout, people who work in takeout, they'll tell you, we'll appreciate 10%. Sometimes they may not even get that, but it's nice to get that, Delivery, personally, I think delivery is kind of the same as serving. I feel like it should be 18 to 20. Some people will tip more, especially if it's something they're driving far or the weather is an issue. And then you have people who we mentioned earlier just don't tip at all.
Yeah.
Which as a delivery person, that sucks. Going into baristas, personally, me and Kim were huge coffee people. We love coffee shops.
Oh yeah.
We go to coffee shops at least 4
or 5 times a week.
Yeah, exactly. So in that case, when I go to coffee shops, if I really like the coffee shops, of course I'm gonna tip. I obviously have my go-to coffee shops where I always tip because the coffee's amazing, the baristas are amazing, everybody's super friendly, that kind of thing. Usually a good tip is $1 to $2 every couple, just a couple dollars. I think the best tip that I've ever given to a barista is, or at a coffee shop was probably $10. But normally I usually tip $3 to $4, on top. Alrighty, so when we're talking about cash versus card as tips, what do you usually prefer?
Cash is king every time.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people will tell you that. Personally, I know that my opinion is not the popular one, but I prefer to get card tips. And the reason is because I am a big spender. I hate to say it, but I am.
You're a shopaholic.
Yeah, I am. And when I get cash tips, cash is free money to me. So I'm yeah, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to spend it on this, blah, blah, blah. I'm so bad. So if there are nights where I'm making nothing but cash tips, I basically didn't even work. Okay? And I hate that I'm like that, but I can't, it's my worst quality, I fear. But for that reason, I prefer card tips because they go straight, where I'm working right now, they go straight to my pay card. They're already in the account. I don't have to, have it in my hands. Don't have to go deposit it or anything. So it's just easier. 2, I like to be able to see all my money in one place. So that's my opinion on that. Alrighty. Let's get into our final thoughts so we can finally wrap this up. We've kept y'all long enough. So what, as servers, do you kind of feel like you wish more people knew?
The hard work that goes behind serving. I feel like so many people have it so wrong when you go and sit down at a restaurant. I don't think guests know, the walking, the tiresome nights, the emotional, abuse, the verbal abuse you get from guests, and you have to be very mentally strong to be a server.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mentally patient.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think one advice that I would probably give is that, to wrap the entire topic up, but tips aren't a bonus, they are the income that we're receiving.
Absolutely.
So I think that's just really important to remember when you're going to a restaurant where you gotta tip a server. I think it's a really, really, really important thing to remember. Alrighty, that kind of wraps us up for today. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for coming back this week. It was really, really great having you. I'm so happy that we got to talk about this topic that I've been dying to talk about for so long.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And listeners, all I want you to know is tip your servers, enjoy your food, and speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. Thank you all for listening and watching. Can't wait to see you next week. Have a great night.